let you know why we're here. So as you know, the state received roughly $2.7 billion in federal funding through the American Rescue Plan. And it's afforded us this unprecedented opportunity to make investments in our communities around the state. So with me today, I have the team from the Scott administration, and while we don't represent all of the $2.7 billion, we can talk a bit about how we do represent that money, and the goal is to try to make sure that you all can access the money to the best of your abilities, and that we really understand what your goals are, and again, be a partner and be a teammate in terms of trying to get the money into your region and really making the investments so that they count now and into the future. So before we go too far into it, I wanted to give Erica an opportunity to say a few words, and then we'll go on with the team.
Going to be very brief because this is an incredible opportunity for people to actually talk to the people who are making these decisions and to share your hopes and dreams for what this funding can do. It's great to see so many municipalities on this side of Orange County represented. My name is Eric Hoffman-Keese. I'm your Regional Development Corporation Director, and with Green Mountain Economic Development Corporation. That serves Orange County and Northern Windsor County, not the entire state of Vermont, which sometimes the name can be a little misleading. So as you think about what you're hearing today from these folks, and you start looking at what you're trying to do in your own communities, if there's a conduit needed, or if there's help or assistance or support required locally to help a process along, that's what we're here for. We're the boots on the ground regionally to make sure that the things that these folks are trying to do for the state are impacting Orange County the way that you would like to see them impact Orange County. So thanks for taking time and coming through the snowstorm today. There is a sign-up sheet in the back, a sign-in sheet in the back that I just asked you to kind of hit sometime before you leave today. And that way we can make sure that we have a way to connect with you once we've had the conversations today. It's always nice to be able to go back to someone who's heard commenting. Thank you.
Oh, great. So we're coming in the room. That's great. Great timing. There's more seats over here too. So as I mentioned, of this $2.7 billion in American Rescue Plan money coming to our state, we don't necessarily have folks in the room to represent all of it, but we also have folks in the room that represent other buckets of money, so to speak, that can be braided with this money, or locked onto it to help make it spread further. So again, our goal today is really to help set us on a continued path to recovery, but also to set us on a course for a real stronger economic recovery and an economic future as we go down the road. So with that, what I wanted to do is go around the group here. As I get to you, if you'll give them your name, your what agency you're from, and do a 3 to 4 minute pitch on the area that you cover, whether it be ARPA, or if it's not ARPA money, how you sort of can link in or add on to that, so to speak. That would be great. And Doug, I'm not going to start with you because I'd like when you play cleanup batter, if you're okay with that. You're probably the most important in the room. Just kidding. So I'm going to start with Neil, if that's okay, and we're going to come back to Doug. So Neil, if you will do introductions and take it away.
All right. Great. Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Neil Kam, and I'm here on behalf of Secretary Julie Moore from the Agency of Natural Resources. I am actually the director of the Water Investment Division for the agency, the Department of Environmental Conservation. And I'm privileged to get to work with a lot of these folks to help implement the American Rescue Plan Act investments in the area of water and sewer infrastructure. So what that means is, like the wastewater plant, where when you flush your toilet, if you are sending wastewater down to a municipal facility, or if you are sending it to a leach field and a septic system in your backyard, we have programs that are supporting both of those types of wastewater infrastructure. There are 6 programs in the Agency of Natural Resources that collectively are implementing just under $200 million to support water and sewer infrastructure. And Broadly, and you're welcome to ask me detailed questions about them later, but broadly, those are in the category of helping either existing municipal wastewater systems deal with intractable pollution control problems, or to help build new wastewater capacity in some of our designated villages. There are well over 100 villages in the state of Vermont that don't have any centralized sewer system at all. And it's a real limitation in growth, so you can't have a restaurant like you have over here, the nice Italian place we just had lunch. So we have a pretty strong investment there. One of our major investments is also in assisting low-income Vermonters, both those that live in manufactured home communities, to fix up the infrastructure that's been neglected for a long time there. And also individual Vermont homeowners who have affordability challenges to fix their own septic systems. The brand new septic system can cost $20,000, $30,000 more. And there are a slice of Vermonters that are living with inadequate water and sewer at their own homes that we're helping with part of the ARPA investment as well. So those are our, just broadly speaking at a 30,000 foot level, our major programs. We've got a smaller program that is dedicated to helping businesses work with their municipality to deal with what can be high strength waste. So think if you have a brewery in town and that brewery is making great beer and sending their wastewater down to the town plant, and the town plant has a hard time processing that. So we have a program to help work with the businesses and the municipalities to upgrade treatment so that it makes that wastewater treatment plant go further for everybody in the town. And then there's a program that we are just building up, and this one, ears open for folks, is in the area of just general rural infrastructure support for small systems that are at risk of failure. And it's not a large appropriation, but we have up to $10 million to help both wastewater and especially small drinking water systems that are facing challenges. And there's a lot of challenges out there in small drinking water system areas. So I'm working with this gentleman right here, whom you'll meet soon, to figure out ways to make that as easy as possible to get those dollars to communities. The last thing I want to say about, I'll just offer one more piece. I'm getting close. You give me the hook when it's time. In addition to all this ARPA money, folks will have heard about the bipartisan infrastructure law, which is also called the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, signed earlier in 2022. That's a monumental infusion of dollars to support water and sewer infrastructure in Vermont. It's about a $375 million investment in the state. And those dollars are available in particular to communities that have affordability challenges that we're required to literally subsidize 49% of any loans that communities are taking. So 49% free money out of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act for lower, so for communities that have affordability challenges or disadvantaged communities. I want to introduce my colleague Lynette Cladone, who's in the back row there. Lynette is an absolute expert in water infrastructure, is here with me to answer any questions when we're done afterwards. So I'll stop there and turn it back to you.
Sure. Actually, I'm going to go right down the line to Joan.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joan Goldstein, Commissioner of Department of Economic Development. That's within the Agency of Commerce. I'm going to talk about 3 different programs, even though the agency has many more. The largest ARPA, that's the American Rescue Plan Act funding that we have, is the Community Recovery and Revitalization Program. Last session, we were appropriated $40 million, that's $40 million, in order to help those who are recovering from the pandemic. And the way that's defined is in very specific buckets. The money could be used, an applicant could be an affordable housing project, or for childcare, or if you're located in a qualified census tract, we have a map on our site that could show whether or not your particular project is in that area. Or you're in an impacted industry defined as either agriculture, educational services, hospitality, or arts and entertainment and recreation is into that category. The other thing we have is municipalities could apply for this money. The municipality could apply for water, wastewater projects that assist or help maintain housing or an economic development initiative. So those are the sort of 5 buckets of qualifications that you need. We could pay up to $1 million to the project. That's $1 million or 20% of the project cost. It's the lesser of. So in many cases, it is being teamed up with some of the agency natural resource funding, some of the other funding from the feds or the state. We opened up this application in November. The first 30 days were for non-Chittenden County, non-Franklin County applications, as well as any business that's owned or operated for or by BIPOC population. We opened it up to everybody at the end of December, and hopefully within the next few weeks we'll be announcing some of the first awardees. I can tell you that it is very popular. We have over 80 applications asking for over $30 million. I'm not saying everyone's going to get it, but if you are thinking about applying, we want to hear from you. We want to help work through eligibility requirements and how to line up the different sources of funding. On the general fund money, we have Brownfield Revitalization Fund, and those of you who know of or are interested in contaminated properties, we have many in the state. The state has a program through the Agency of Natural Resources where you as an innocent purchaser could limit your liability for taking possession of that property. And then we come in with remediation money to mitigate that contamination so that we could clean up the property and you could bring it back to productive use. This is modeled somewhat after the federal program, only it's a lot more flexible. And what do I mean by that? Typically the feds had put a cap of about, I think it was $250, they've since raised it to $500,000, but we know some of these contaminated projects cost in the millions. So the state general fund money is way more flexible in terms of the amount that you could get, as well as it's available for not just nonprofits and municipalities, but also for for-profit individuals. We know that these properties cost a lot to remediate, and sometimes if you can't afford it or there's a funding gap, the property remains contaminated and not to its fullest and best use. So we had, in the last 2 sessions, been appropriated $16 million. We've spent about 11 of that, so there's a residual that's still available if you have a project and want to know about it. And the governor's budget last week announced another $12.5 million for this purpose, just because we do want to clean up as many sites as possible to use for housing or economic development purposes. The other funding bucket I'll talk about is what we call the Northern Border Regional Commission. That's a federal commission. The difference here is that federal money gets administered through the commission. It does not really hit the state budget. However, we are responsible for soliciting applications, working through applicants and the uses. This has been extremely flexible money. It usually goes to a not-for-profit or a municipality, and for purposes of economic development with a predominant and a preference for infrastructure. So again, some of that money is teamed up with some of the infrastructure requests and grant money from A&R, or also teamed up with some of the ARPA money. So that is not open yet. I think in March we'll be soliciting letters of intent, and then usually in May an application comes out. It's usually oversubscribed, become very popular. Every county in Vermont is eligible to apply for this money, the Northern Border money. I think I'll stop there and I'll pass it on to the next, and happy to answer questions.
Hi everybody, I'm Christine Holquist. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Community Broadband Board. We have 3 main tasks. First being get every Vermont address connected to fiber optic internet. The second is make it affordable. And the third is to maximize positive social impact. And I'm really pleased to tell you that, thanks to the wisdom of our the administration as well as the legislature, we're really leading the nation in terms of connectivity. We're the only state that's committed to connect every address to fiber optic internet. And we have the funds to do that. The good news is we have a plan, we have funds, we formed what are called communication union districts. There are 10 throughout the state. The money is being funded to those. 6 of the 10 are in construction as we speak. That connectivity is enabled by $245 million in ARPA funds that have been set aside, plus another $100 minimum that'll be coming from the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act. So that gives us the money and the plan in order to get everyone connected. That really provides about 60% of the capital cost of the total infrastructure. Now the problem is the next challenge, I'll call it, is the opportunity. Is affordability. And if you look at where we're trying to serve, the areas we haven't served today, that aren't served today, they aren't served because it's very expensive to serve them. So in order to make it affordable, we're aggressively pursuing additional grants. We're optimistically could get several $100 million more in the infrastructure investment job. And every $50 million we receive reduce the cost to the consumer by $10. So you're looking at, when you look at your internet bill, we could get it down as low as $50. And there are federal programs for low-income Vermonters that provide $30 a month, plus other programs $8. So for low-income folks, it's particularly important to get those costs down. Because if you look who's not connected here in Vermont, as well as across rural America, it's primarily lower-income folks. People who were moneyed have figured out how to get connected. So that ties to our third goal, which is to maximize positive social impact. And we received a $518,000 federal grant to develop, through August of this year, we're going to develop an equity plan which will provide funding for the next 5 years to help bridge that digital and economic divide that occurs. Because people, if you're not participating in the internet today, you're not participating in telehealth, teleeducation, and even social programs. So our job's not done until we help those folks get connected. That means providing devices, training, support, and we're working with the Department of Libraries and others to do that as well. And also, when we talk about maximize social impact, there's so much that can be done once you're connected to broadband. And I'm going to say, if it's not fiber optic, it's not broadband. So that fiber optic internet allows you to do a lot with data. For example, one of the things that I'm personally particularly excited about is the opportunity for agriculture. When you get to the what they call sub-meter accuracy on your soils, you can reduce your nutrient applications by greater than 30%, which of course has benefits to our waterways and others. And I will give you an example working with this young woman who's the general manager of the 900 acres farm that feeds Jasper Hill cheese up outside of Harvard. She is master's from UVM, very excited about the opportunity because, for example, she says she drives 100 miles a day just to check the moisture content of the soils. So we're looking for every opportunity to make Vermonters' lives better through that connectivity and really providing everybody equal opportunity for improvement.
All right. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm Alex Farrell. I'm from the Department of Housing and Community Development. We've got a one-pager in the back that talks about a few specific programs. I'm going to talk about some of them right now, but I'm going to recommend grabbing that on your way out because it can get into some detail that I don't think I need to get into from here. But I want to talk about the first bucket of money, which is helping communities to prepare for housing development. And then, also touch on just the other bucket of programs that we have, which actually invest in either funding housing development or community placemaking. So the first bucket, this is municipal planning grants and bylaw modernization grants. When you hear those, just think about helping the municipality to update ordinances, update zoning, do feasibility studies, basically put in the work ahead of time to make it possible to develop and figure out what items they need to invest in order to make sure that housing can come into play. So this is funding for municipalities. It could be used for a specific site or portion of town, or it could, like I said, be used to update and improve zoning and bylaws. So this is money that is actually going to help the rest of the ARPA dollars and future federal investment stretch further, because if we invest this money now and we get municipalities ready to develop, then any funds that they use, whether it be ARPA funds or future funding, is going to be invested more smartly. You're not going to have to spend all that time planning and figuring out where we need via feasibility studies. So this is something we're really trying to encourage municipalities to take advantage of right now. It's the municipal planning grants and bylaw modernization. I'll also just touch on, along those same lines, the state designation program. This is an ongoing program, but when you hear about designated downtowns, designated villages, this is the program through which those designated centers come to be. It comes to the downtown board, which is administered by our department. Again, this is a tool for municipalities to bring in a whole wide variety of either investment that can go straight to straight to private property owners who live within that downtown or village center, and it opens up a whole other set of tools for public investment in those areas. So this is another tool that, again, will stretch ARPA and other future public dollars a lot farther. So this is something that municipalities focus on this now. It's going to help going into the future. And then just to talk about some of the funding sources that we have that go directly into housing or community development. So one that I'm going to talk about is sort of our flagship program. This is ongoing funding, so this is not ARPA, but it is being paired with ARPA to make those dollars stretch further. This is the Vermont Community Development Program. Some folks here might be familiar with CDBG, Community Development Block Grant. That money goes through this program. And so these are funds that can either go to infrastructure, housing, or community centers that primarily serve folks that are low-income folks, at or below 80% of the area median income. But again, this is an ongoing source that we get about $8 million every year, and right now we're doing everything we can to use this money to make sure ARPA dollars stretch further. So some municipalities, and the municipality has to be the applicant, a lot of times they're a co-applicant with a developer. But to make the ARPA fund stretch further, this could be used for infrastructure or a development that's going to go in using ARPA funds and other private funding sources. This could be a gap filler if ARPA and other private funds are just coming up short. This can fund a certain number of the units. And this can also be used, again, for planning. So Vermont Community Development Program does have planning grants for a particular project. If your municipality has prioritized a certain project that they know can bring online a lot of housing units, they can come to this program and get a planning grant up to $25,000 to help make sure you have all the groundwork laid to get that in place. The last program I'm going to talk about, because it's really powerful for private property owners, that individuals can apply for this money. This is the Vermont Housing Improvement Program. We refer to it as VHIP, and this is grants up to $50,000. This has been leveraging ARPA, and this is to bring, if you have an old housing unit that's fallen out of code, but you want to bring it back online, this grant can help you bring that back online. If you've got an old Victorian house that say you want to split up into 2 or 3 units, this can play a role in that. If you have a commercial space that you want to convert into housing, again, same thing. This can help you. It does prioritize housing folks out of homelessness or refugees. Otherwise, the grant amount is reduced, but you can still apply for that, and you just have to keep rents at HUD fair market value to basically serve low-income folks. That's all I'm going to talk about for now, but any specific projects or anything else, how our money pairs with Joan's money and everybody else's money, Michelle Kuhlhauer is going to talk in a minute about V-Trans funds. We're happy to answer those questions.
Great. Jennifer.
Hi, I'll stand up to the side. So my name is Jennifer Fitch, and I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Buildings and General Services. If you haven't heard of BGS before, that makes a lot of sense, because we primarily provide internal services to state government, and that's through our buildings, print and postal. We also have an energy office that was started in 2012, and ever since then, they have been making state buildings more energy efficient. It's been a very successful program, and so now we have something called Act 172, or the Municipal Energy Resilience Program. It's a $45 million program geared right towards municipalities to make your existing municipal-owned buildings more energy efficient and resilient. There are 3 components to this bill. The first one is a $4,000, what we like to call the mini grant, or the educational grants. Those grant opportunities should be coming out at town meeting day, but the goal of those mini grants is for communities to apply, and it's basically seed funding. And that seed funding may be used for community gatherings. Maybe you want to bring some people together in your town, and you want to talk about all things energy efficiency and resilience, and what does that mean to you. It could be used to start your own energy committee if you don't have one in your town. It can also be used as seed funding to hire a consultant or to hire a volunteer community members that want to come together and identify potential candidate buildings for the program, and also help complete applications for the subsequent opportunities in this program. So really it's to start building capacities in your towns around energy efficiency and resilience. The second part or the component of this program are energy audits. These are free to you. So you need to apply, again, with whatever buildings that you own, to determine how efficient your building is or may not be. And then what will happen is we have consultants that we're getting under contract right now, and we will be working with the regional planning commissions to deploy these consultants that will basically do one of two energy audits. There's either the walk-around audit, which is very similar to what Efficiency Vermont does. Somebody will come, they'll walk around your building, they're gonna probably have an infrared camera, they're gonna look at what existing systems you have, they're gonna look at how leaky your building may be, they're gonna be looking at things like doors and windows and insulation, all of those things that we normally think about when making our buildings more efficient. And they're gonna look at your fuel source as well. The second type of audit is more challenging with respect to the fact that towns need to provide a lot more information about their buildings. But these are our investment grade energy audits. And for those, what we need is we need utility bills. We're gonna need to know some history about the building, any potential upgrades that you made to that building. So there's a lot more information that is required. Why would you wanna do the one that is a little bit more challenging? It's because in addition to the $45 million that we also have a $2.8 million revolving fund that we're starting at BGS just for municipalities. But to apply for that program, you have to do this investment grade audit, because the point is, we look at payback periods. So if it takes 7 years to pay back your lighting, for example, you would basically pay back that revolving fund over that 7-year period, because the goal is we want to try to keep putting money into that revolving fund so that there's more money for us to loan out to municipalities. But that revolving fund is always going to be there, it's not going anywhere. So really we're focused on that $45 million opportunity, because we need to get those dollars out the door before basically the end of the program. So there's two different kinds of audits. The towns will apply. Once towns have applied, then what we'll do is we'll send out those auditors again through our RPCs. They're doing that to help with communication and coordination and technical assistance. So that's the second opportunity. And then the third opportunity is really exciting, is we have up to $500,000 grants to make municipal buildings more energy efficient and resilient, which is amazing and fantastic. There's no match for this program. And the other thing, thanks to Deputy Secretary Farnham, which sounds like you'll hear from him at the end, is that this program was selected for revenue loss replacement. What that means is that it's considered state-funded dollars. And what that means is that you can use these state dollars to match other federal opportunities where you need to have state matched to leverage those federal dollars. And in this world, apparently they call it stacking, so these are stacking opportunities. But basically you can grab other opportunities through leveraging this one. So it's a really exciting program. And the other nice thing about revenue loss replacement is that we need to get the grants out by a certain time frame in accordance with the ARPA sort of overall funding. But then we're going to give towns an additional 2 years to actually get the work done, because we recognize that we have workforce shortages. We don't have enough people in the trades fields, and so we know it's going to take a while for folks to find contractors to come and actually do the work for your communities, and we want to make sure that we're giving people as much time as possible to leverage those opportunities in that funding. So it's a really exciting program. I can't tell you how long we've been waiting to get this program off the ground. We had a little seed funding about 1.5 years ago, and we've slowly been building the program. But this $45 million opportunity really boosts that and propels it forward. And we're so excited to work with communities. Again, we have a lot of partners. We will be primarily working through the Regional Planning Commission. So if you don't know your Regional Planning Commission very well, I get really cozy to them. You get to know who they are. And they usually have energy coordinators as well, which will be on the ground working with the communities. The Vermont League of Cities and Towns, Katie Buckley, I don't know if that's a name you all know, but she's very much actively working with us and supporting the program. And then we also have VCAN, which I'm not great with that acronym. Brian is also in the Energy Office. What does VCAN stand for?
Energy and Climate, actually.
So they are one of our partners, as well as Efficiency Vermont, who are really the leaders in this industry as well. So all of those folks that we're working with and partnering with, again, to make sure that this program is successful as possible. Brian, do you want to add something?
Just briefly, so we do have some information at the back with the other agencies represented today. There's also a flashcard that has a QR code, take you right to our webpage. Please put in your contact information so that when we send out notifications about applications, opening, things like that, you'll be on the list.
And the mini grants are first, so we're hoping to have those out by town meeting day, but very shortly after that, we're going to try to do all of our building assessments, and we're hoping to get that done this year. So be ready for that application to hit the street soon. And then we're hoping to get out the grants the following year, so that will be 2024.
Before you jump in, June, very quick, Erica has something and then we're gonna come back.
The planning commission that you'll be talking to for this region is Two Rivers on Peachy, and if you need contact information, I can help out with that.
Thank you so much.
We are gonna get to questions soon. We've got a few more to roll here, but we're gonna go to Commissioner Tierney.
Good afternoon, everyone. If you can't hear me, please let me know. I am the comedic relief in the troop. I don't have something specific or grammatically to tell you because much of what I might have said has been said much better by people before me, specifically Director Hallquist and of course Commissioner Fitch here. I've been reflecting, what can I add to this conversation that will help you? And the conclusion I draw is this. When I lost my home in Irene, I was just flattened. And I knew my government wanted to help me, but I didn't know how to access my government. And I'm a trained lawyer with a 20-year career in Public Utility Commission and Public Service Department work, litigating cases, et cetera, et cetera. So if it was that hard for me, I can only imagine how hard it must be for some people sitting in this room to imagine, how do I get my arms around this federal funding? What I would say to you is relax, breathe deep, remember the Roosevelt administration got it done in the 30s and 40s with all of that funding, and we still have the legacy items here in Vermont today. What we're doing here is a big deal, and it's coming at us in slugs. What we're talking to you about right now is ARPA, and that's the one that's most established, that we've done the most with. What's still coming is IIJA, the Infrastructure Jobs Act, and then Iowa. Now in my world, which is energy, and specifically residential, commercial, folks who want to put solar panels on their houses, folks who want to install hot water air pump heaters and the like, that stuff is largely going to hit the ground in IRA. Some of it will happen in IIJA, some but not a lot right now in ARPA. But the point is, Commissioner Fitch is able to tell you down to the detail how we can help your municipal buildings, your municipal energy plans and the like, because she and I consult on these things, and my department is able to impart that information to her such that she needs, apart from the fact that she's an outstanding engineer and doesn't need my help. The same thing right here for Director Hallquist. She is the director of an immensely talented SWAT team that is focused just on broadband. Before the SWAT team was created, and we were so very fortunate to recruit Christine for the job, all that work was being done in my department. It is now still being done nominally in that she's embedded with me, but the truth is, this is the brains of the operation with an outstanding board of volunteers, just like folks in this room who are getting that job done for Vermont. So you have huge roles to play, you're heroes in your community, a lot's being asked of you, and we're here trying to close a gap, just like folks closed a gap with me in Irene and taught me how to access my government. What we don't know is what you don't know. And the only way we know that is if you come forward and talk to us, which is why we're here today. Now, if you get to a crisis moment where you just don't remember which one to talk to, or what exactly it was you needed to ask, or what you need to ask only occurs to you at 2 o'clock in the morning, as is often happens to me, just remember Commissioner June Tierney, Department of Public Service. There is a Consumer Affairs Public Information Office in my department. Many of you know that from looking at your utility bills. If you call us because you're hopelessly lost, but you know you've got questions and you know those questions will help, just call us. We'll put you in touch with the right people. Whether it's Christine or Jennifer or any of the other people except for Doug Farnham. we'll get you there. I know we're from the government. I know we're saying we're here to help. But we really are here to help.
Ian, take it away.
Thank you. Nancy Tebbets from the Agency of Agriculture. So I'm going to talk about farms and food.
So we're trying to build a better system for more local food, not only to feed ourselves, but also to feed the region, which we can do very well. But we need some support there. And a lot of it is, we're talking about processing and infrastructure. So a couple programs to keep in mind. We have a program called the Working Lands Enterprise Fund. And those are grants to farm, food, and forestry that look at the infrastructure. So say you're producing meat and you need more freezer space. Maybe you need a new piece of equipment that's really expensive. That's a program for you there. We have considerable funding over the last few years because of some of the federal funds that have come our way. Another on the dairy side, I would focus on something called the Dairy Innovation Center. We've received some USDA money, and think about something maybe you want on your farm to improve your operation on the farm. For example, we recently awarded about $1 million to farmers to improve their storage capacity, their cooling, their bulk tanks, all that stuff that needed a lot of support over the years that had not been able to achieve because of just the economy of the dairy. So that's helping. We're getting more trucks off the road. Milk trucks aren't having to drive as much. They can pick up maybe every other day, not picking up maybe sometimes twice a day. So that's a program for something that's on the farm. We're also looking for more processing, for example, cheese makers. We need more support there to get our award-winning cheeses out to more people. But they need support with that. So that is a program that is available for them. We're about to kick off a $13 million processing grant through that. So if we need more processing in the area, we have plenty of milk, but sometimes we don't have any processing and it has to travel too far. For example, there's no organic processing really in the region. So we've got all these organic farmers being shipped to other states to be processed. So it's one of those programs that we think would be valuable if we can get more processing within the region. And I'll put a plug in a couple of the governor's initiatives that are going through the Agency of Agriculture that are very important to grow our rural economy. He's proposed a $10 million program for more processing for meat. Many of you may have experienced, maybe you've raised a few animals and can't get them processed. Maybe you have some commercial accounts and they're backed up and can't get them done. We need more meat capacity, more processing. We need more help for the maple industry as that grows as well, and we need more help for the vegetable and fruit industry. So it's a $10 million proposal for grants to those three sectors to improve the processing for those, and more money for working lands, which also would be eligible. So I think those are a couple of things that we're looking forward to doing to produce more food for our neighbors, get it to the regions. We have wonderful opportunities with 91 here and 93 and 89. We just got to be strategic of how we do this to produce more local food, award-winning food that we can get into some of our bigger pockets, but also feed ourselves. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Michelle Boomhauer with the Vermont Agency of Transportation. I'm here representing Secretary Joe Flynn. And within my group, we do policy planning and intermodal development, which is rail, aviation, and public transit. But I'm here to broadly talk about our federal program funds. That's where most of the opportunity lies for communities that are here today. Under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, separate from ARPA, separate from the IRA federal programs, many new programs were created for rural communities, for environmental justice communities, and there's such a significant amount of money within these new programs, efficiency programs for transportation efficiency, that we are hoping that communities will either singularly or in a consortium manner pull together and apply for some of these grants. And we are working with the League of Cities and Towns and the regional planning commissions to help provide educational programs to help you understand what it will take to apply for these grants, maybe provide some technical assistance, and help you understand sort of what it's going to take to implement the grant as well, because of, as we all know, these federal dollars come with a lot of strings attached. Additionally, our core programs have had more money added to them hopefully inflation won't eat all of that away. We obviously, like all of you, are suffering from that as well. So I have a couple of handouts in the back related to all of our existing programs, another one related to all the new federal programs that are out there for communities, and I'll be here afterwards if people have questions. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lisa Kolb. I'm here on behalf of Vermont Emergency Management and your state hazard mitigation team. And one of the things we wanted to highlight today is it has never been a better time to apply for hazard mitigation funding. We currently have $35 million in grant funding opportunities. A lot of those are FEMA related. And I know it's going to shock you, but sometimes with FEMA funding, we can't always do some of the fantastic projects we want to do because of government regulations. Hence, Flood Resilient Communities Fund, which is our ARPA funded program. We've had the ability to take some really great mitigation projects, a lot of them dealing with flooding here in Vermont, and we're able to fund them. Some are looking for pieces to be funded. Maybe you already have some funding in place and you just need some additional funding. Others we've been able to fund at 100%. And there are hazard mitigation program projects that can be anything from a project that is a buyout or an acquisition and demolition of a flood-prone property. If you have any dealings with flood mitigation projects, under FEMA, they're required to be under the special flood hazard area in order to qualify for funding. Again, rivers and floods don't follow flood maps produced by FEMA. So if you have a flood-prone property in your community that does flood, Flood Resilient Communities Fund can step in and help you with that. We've done, or in the process of doing, a vacant parcel buyout. Why put a property up or a big building up in an area that you know is going to flood in the future? Instead, it allows municipalities to purchase that property and keep it open space in perpetuity. We can do some project scoping. We have, some of the neatest projects we have is anywhere from the Newton School came to us and said, we want to plant native trees along a river in order to help with erosion. And that was a small project, not FEMA eligible, and we were working with an entity that normally does not qualify for FEMA funding. We were able to, they had shovel ready, talk about a shovel ready project. If you go to our website, you can see the students at Newton School planting their trees. All the way up to Brattleboro, in Brattleboro, Tri-Park, which is a mobile home community, which is a cooperative, would not qualify for FEMA funding ordinarily. The other thing is trying to give a good value to mobile homeowners. It doesn't work under FEMA funding. So we are working collaboratively with a lot of different partners, both private and other government, state agencies, in order to put together a funding package which is going to allow that cooperative to move a number of homes and homeowners out of a floodway, which actively floods, and move them within their own cooperative park to another pad with an updated home which is going to be energy efficient. So it really is, it's fantastical, just the things that we can do. So here's what we say. As it's been said, a lot of information. And you're like, okay, what do I do next? I do not have a handy-dandy fancy graphic to hand out, I apologize. I have my business card. And what we ask you to do is contact us directly. We want to give you good customer service. We want to hear about your projects and your ideas. We want to find the best funding stream. Maybe it is FEMA. Maybe it fits well with FEMA and we can assist you there. If not, what we'd like to do is work with you to develop that application for Flood Resilient Communities Fund and help you design the best project that you can do, so that when you go to implementation, it goes as smooth as humanly possible. So with that said, like I said, I do have my business card. You can go onto Vermont Emergency Management website, see some great pictures. We have a landslide buyout that we did, which the building is, I mean, it's about to go in the river. Had we pursued it with FEMA funding, I don't know that we would have gotten it done in time, but here we are, we're getting ready to demolish that. But again, think outside of the box. would rather you have a call with us. We can set up a meeting and talk through what you're looking to do. If we can work with you to make it happen, we will. If not, maybe we can point you in the direction of another agency. And then lastly, we've had 3 rounds of Flood Resilient Communities funds that we have already gone to award or are starting. But what we heard from our town municipalities and our RPC is you're about maxed out on capacity, correct? Not one more deadline, not one more thinking about something coming up. We've moved to a rolling deadline for as long as we can. So we will work with you. We will work with you in order to get those projects pulled together on your timeline. So again, anybody have any questions? I'll be around after. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Kathy Delnau. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Libraries and the State Librarian. And in your communities here in Orange County, you have quite a lot of libraries, and many of them are small and rural. So I have some great news for you. We have 2 grant opportunities that I want to share with you today. One of them is is some funding that we've requested from the Department of U.S. Let me start over. We requested the funding from the U.S. Department of Treasury, and that is $16.4 million that we know is really important to communities because during the COVID-19 public health emergency, we saw lots of people in communities, especially rural communities, as Christine Hallquist was talking about, who really didn't have access to the internet to do what a lot of folks turned online to do. They went to school, they went to work, and they also did telehealth. Well, that worked really well in communities that were super connected, where the libraries were able to open the doors and the facilities had great circulation of air, and they were able to let people come in during the pandemic. But across Vermont, we saw a lot of libraries that actually had to close for periods of the pandemic. They had to move to front door service or even outdoor service. So did any of you see that in your communities locally? So that's something that during the pandemic, the Department of Libraries supported folks in kind of trying to sort through the changing requirements for health and safety in public buildings. But what we'd really like to do is to have folks in communities here in Vermont access some of these funds, these federal funds that we've requested, and we're waiting for approval from Treasury. We want those $16.4 million to help you and your communities make your buildings more resilient so that if there's another pandemic, if there's another health emergency, God forbid, you would still be able to access the internet in those libraries. So we really are working on developing our application for that. Right now, we're kind of in a holding pattern waiting for approval from the Department of Treasury. But I mentioned there's a second opportunity. And this is one, so there are 2 flyers in the back. One is green from the Department of Libraries and one is blue. The one that's blue is actually about some funding that we requested through the congressionally directed spending process at the federal level. And Senator Leahy's office was instrumental in helping us to secure that funding through the Consolidated Appropriations Act, which was passed at the end of December. And through that, and this is where Orange County is in a kind of a sweet spot because you have a lot of small and rural libraries. This funding is specifically geared towards small, rural public libraries. And you may have communities where you just haven't got the funding locally to make improvements to your building to make sure it continues to operate as a public library well into the future. Your library is, if that sounds like you, then this is funding that we'd really like you to apply for when the application becomes available, because we have $10 million of funding from the federal government through the congressionally directed spending process that is specifically geared toward providing resources to address repair and mitigation needs in small rural communities, especially those libraries that you might open up after hours or host community meetings. Those libraries where it's more than a library, it's your community meeting space as well, and it's really central to your local municipality. And this is specifically focused, this funding is specifically focused on economically depressed areas. So as we build out our rubric and as we build out our grant application, small and rural libraries will rise to the top, and also communities that have a higher need will rise to the top. So I think that those 2 funding sources are going to be really valuable for you here in Orange County. What we plan to do at the Department of Libraries is we're working on a needs assessment. We have a great network throughout the state of email lists of all of the library directors and all of the trustees, but we will happily add folks to those lists so that we can share out information with even more of the community. What we will be doing is hosting a webinar, having people fill out a needs assessment to describe their projects, and then as we develop the actual grant application, we'll be having more webinars to really help people to learn about the opportunities that are available to public libraries in Vermont to access these two funding sources. We know it's tough to do any grant application, so what we want to do is to have one grant application where libraries can fill it out to access either of the two programs that they might qualify for. If you're not sure if your library's project would qualify, we're happy to field questions. It's a little bit hypothetical still because we're waiting for some of the, we're waiting for the approval from Treasury, and we're also learning more about the housing and urban development congressionally directed spending money. But Senator Welch's office has been in touch to, I hope, help us to access that funding and talk us through this process. And we're learning about kind of the parameters of each of those buildings, and we'll be making the pre-application available, I think, next month, and then we'll have an application after that. Thank you.
Doug, you wanna pull it all together for us? How would we work?
So I'm Douglas Farnham, I'm the Deputy Secretary from the Agency of Administration, and I'm gonna ramble a little bit here.
That's all right.
So, almost 3 years ago, when the pandemic started, the state of Vermont made the choice to centralize some of the administration of pandemic-related programs. So, the Agency of Administration stepped into the role of reviewing the program setup and helping the departments, the policy departments that run all of these areas implement them. So, in the 2.5 years I've been with the Agency of Administration, we've reviewed and implemented over 250 pandemic-related programs. So the first 1.25 billion was coronavirus relief fund. That was all mostly response money, very short term. All of that money has been spent, expended down to the last penny, and we closed out that fund with the federal government. So coronavirus relief fund, we did some good things there, mostly short term, a lot of healthcare related stuff. A little bit of economic recovery and mostly repairing the short term damage wherever we could help out. The 1.05 billion of ARPA state fiscal recovery, we have stood up at least 80 programs at this point in time. And the thing that AOA does there is takes the federal rules, takes the state legislative mandate, and then takes the governor's policy and integrates them as much as possible. And so that's the role I play in all of this, is working with all the various programs. And of course, BGS and Department of Libraries are part of AOA, and they directly manage some programs. But the agency kind of has broad oversight of how we're approaching all of our programs. So one reason I really wanted to be here today was because we filed our first annual report last year, and we saw that through no fault of anyone in the legislature, the governor, any of our programs, a lot of the projects that were coming in and getting approved and moving forward were in the denser populated areas of the state. The distribution was not equitable, it was focused. And so when we talk to various programs, we're not seeing, it's not that they're turning down applications from everywhere, it's that we're not getting the applications we need to get for there to be an equitable distribution. And the root cause of that, after talking to a couple other counties, and I don't want to put words in your guys' mouths, but is that it really comes down to resources. And I was just in Berkshire looking at their town garage, which is a project that probably needs to happen for environmental reasons and as well as for transportation reasons. It's a good project, and they're approaching it in a really thoughtful and responsible way. But in that particular project, we're trying to line up the right program with that project, and sometimes square peg round hole, sometimes things just don't fit. So we're trying to be as helpful as we can. But the reason we're not getting applications is a lack of resources out in the field to kind of come up with the projects that need to happen. A lot of these communities know their needs, but getting it from the need state to the application state is a lot of work. And you can't necessarily rely on volunteers to do that. Sometimes you get amazing volunteers, sometimes you get someone that comes in, works part-time for a town and does amazing work. But you can't always rely on that. And we're all Vermonters. Every Vermonter should benefit from this money equally. It's $1 billion, and we want it to have as broad and as fair of an impact as possible. So that's the lens that I try to bring to the table from the Agency of Administration. So although we don't directly administer any programs, we meddle. You know, we kind of poke people and issue bulletins and requirements, things like that.
You give hugs too.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's kind of helpful.
Hugs, free hugs.
No, we do actually, we have actually implemented 250 programs in a very short amount of time in a streamlined manner, so we do help too. But I do think that was all leading into, although we don't have a program right now, we hope to have something that's not quite a program, but it's in the Budget Adjustment Act, and it's $3 million for rural assistance. And it's $3 million of technical support that AOA would help facilitate, but really make available to the towns, and then the towns would be able to directly approach and help develop projects and help make sure we know and are able to have at the state what is the book of work that needs to happen to help Vermonters move forward at the same pace. And right now, big towns with 10 staff can put together their projects and can put in great looking applications, and Neil's going to accept some of those applications because they're great applications, right? And they're great projects. But we need to provide those same resources. And I think one of the tricks here is that this is a short-term assistance, and it's focused at taking advantage of the opportunity that ARPA and IIJA, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the Inflation Reduction Act that June was talking about, and the Omnibus Spending Package. There's so much federal money that's in all these different areas. And those technical resources would help towns line up opportunities with their needs, because that by itself is extremely difficult to keep track of. And if we were to duplicate it everywhere, it would be wasteful. So I think some towns, they need the opportunity, they need the resources and help to make their own decisions at the local level. So it helps in identifying opportunities and needs. And then there's of course a long-term conversation that needs to happen. This proposal isn't for the long-term solution, but I will acknowledge that this kind of was a stress test for our system, and it showed that we need to talk about it and think about it as Vermonters. So I think that
was really great. See, do you see why I wanted you to do the wrap? I also want to take a minute before I open for questions. There are a few other people in the room from the governor's office that I want to acknowledge. In the back row, Kendall, would you mind standing up? This is Kendall Smith. She's the governor's senior policy director. And then we also have from our state workforce board, we have the executive director, Tori Biondolillo, and we have the deputy director, Abby Ram. And am I missing anyone else from the governor's office in the back? Okay, all right. And do any of you have anything you wanted to add before we send it around?
No, I don't. I think it'd be great sometimes in the discussion.
Okay.
And hear from everyone else here about how we can hopefully assist.
Exactly. We want to assist you. That's what we're here for. So at this point, I would like to open the floor. Maybe just raise your hand and we'll try to get around. Wendy, did you have something?
I am trying to record for people who couldn't make it to the storm, so if you could maybe repeat people's questions.
Sure.
So except for the
all right, I will try to do that. If I forget, just give me a wave. All right. So sure. When I call on you, if you would just give your name and try to articulate your question, because it sounds like I'm going to be repeating it before we toss it to somebody to try to answer it. So who wants to kick us off?
Sure.
Sure.
Jim Bolter from the town of Topsom.
Jim Bolter.
I have a question, and I will just say this is fantastic to have you folks come here and share what you've shared. Because in a small town where we're all volunteers, many times we don't know where to look for the help and just throw up our hands and say, well, now we don't know where to start. The question I have that I've been told in the past, in our town plan has not been adopted. When COVID came along and trying to get things done, we've moved along where we're more or less have it together. It's about to come to the town, and then of course it goes to the regional planning commission. My question is, I've been told that we cannot apply for housing or development grants, or even having our 3 villages designated as village centers until our plan is approved. So we're kind of in the mud here and not knowing where to turn or how to get this moving a little faster.
Okay, so just to repeat the question, your town plan has yet to be adopted.
Right.
Sounds like it's fairly far along, but not adopted. And the question is, are you able to apply for these grants that we talked about, or even downtown or village designations, while you don't have an officially adopted plan?
Correct.
I'm gonna start with Alex.
Sure,
And
yeah.
you know, you can phone a friend or ask for a lifeline.
Doug's a catch-all, right? So Doug
Yes. Doug is like having it to yes guy.
So I'll stand up, I'm sure. All right, so to start with, yeah, if there's a town plan on the way, that is going to be a necessary component of the designation program. I will say village center designations are generally lower barrier. So a lot of communities around here that would qualify for a village center rather than a downtown designation, that is lower barrier. So if you were to reach out to our team, we could help make sure those hurdles are cleared, but usually that's a good tool for the smaller communities, the village center designation. Once you get that, then yes, that opens up certain other tools, but it is not a prerequisite for a lot of tools. For example, the community development block grants through the Vermont Community Development Program, you do not need a designation to access that funding. Same thing with these individual grants, the Vermont Housing Improvement Program. So there are a couple tools that the state designation program helps with. A lot of that is the downtown and village center tax credits. There are a couple other programs that rely on that, but a lot of the funding that we can make available for communities does not require a designation. Was that helpful?
Yes.
And June would like to add to that.
Yeah.
This is where my colleagues get scared, because I'm about to say something that probably is not what they want to hear, but still. You can also try moving in tandem. Just because you don't have the plan actually adopted, doesn't mean you can't apply. It just means you need to flag it's not yet adopted and that you're doing everything possible to adopt. And Doug, I'm saying this because there's a shot clock on these funds. So if you're in the situation where your plan can't be adopted at town meeting this year, it's not going to be until a special meeting is warned or next March, at least try. Reach out and say, Doug, Alex, Jim, is there a way for us to get a waiver of some kind so that we can move in parallel as we try to finalize the plan and apply for these things? Because otherwise we're going to miss the boat. So don't give up.
And something I've heard June and everybody here say, which is absolutely true, just the reach out, because our staff also wants to act as advisors. Now, to the extent that we can lend resourcing, that would depend on, but we do want to act as sort of assistants and advisors to let you know what can we get moving while you're waiting for that approval. So, absolutely.
Yeah, removing barriers, right? Yes. So is
Thank
that
you.
helpful, Jim? Thank
Very
you.
much so.
All right. There's got to be others. Okay, in the back.
Carl Demerol, I'm the state representative for the Orange Board District, and I'd love to hear from Doug a little bit more about the $3 million in the budget adjustment, and how that might work if it goes through, and how that money might go out to help communities with planning and with the technical assistance to get some of these projects done.
Okay, so the representative would like to hear more about the $3 million in the governor's budget for proposed technical assistance to help our rural regions access the ARPA dollars or federal dollars, as we talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Representative. So the first, I guess the starting point of that $3 million is that the Agency of Administration for the ARPA State Fiscal Recovery Funds put together an underserved community index. And so we tried to evaluate the needs in a community through a series of demographics like percentage of population above a certain federal poverty level, 150%, labor force participation rates, population trends over time. Many of our communities, unfortunately, are losing population. And we also had a capacity index within that, which gets at the size of the community. Do they have a town administrator or manager? How are they near a large university? Some of these indicators. And So that index, rated all the 246 census units in Vermont. So not the 252, but the 246. We did exclude towns below 50 people from that, but I don't think that affects anyone in Orange County. I think that's mostly a Northeast Kingdom issue. So our proposal is that for the towns that are above 75% or in the top 25% of that index would receive access to this rural assistance money. And it's left a little bit open in the exact mechanics in the law of how that would happen. And that's intentional because if a town that's on that list recently chose to hire a part-time economic development specialist or a grant manager, we'd want to be able to help them continue that activity. If they want to go in with 2 or 3 other towns to, hire a full-time staff, we'd want to do that. But if they can't find anyone that they can directly engage with, and we want to be able to RFP, request for proposals, and set up a retainer list that if you're in Orange County, you can go to this organization and they will provide you with these services. And then they will bill us at AOA directly. So you wouldn't have to go through AOA, basically, if you're on the list above a certain point. And I'm really tempted to throw out names of towns that I think are in the top 25%, but I really shouldn't do that.
But there is a big chunk here in Orange County.
Yes, Orange County I do know does have, I guess, good for the opportunity, but unfortunately does have a lot of communities that are on that list that are showing the demographic issues that that they could use some assistance, right? So we may make some modifications, working with the legislature, we've gotten a lot of feedback. We may make some modifications to the index, but most of those modifications are intended at making it perhaps more precise and trying to find alternative data sets. The problem with small towns in Vermont is that we don't have a lot of data on those communities. So the index has to work with publicly available data.
Can you just clarify? I think I said that it was in the proposed budget, but if it's in the BAA, it matters just because of timing,
Yeah,
right?
It's in the BAA because
What that is.
basically we have until the end of next year, so 12/31/2024, to get a grant agreement in place, to get a project obligated, to get a contract in place in order to use ARPA funds. So we are almost 50% obligated. Now, we're tallying up the data from our last report, so I think we're gonna come in around 500 million out of the billion obligated, meaning the door is closing on getting grant applications in. And if smaller communities there's still opportunity, but it's dwindling rapidly. So that's one reason it's in the BAA. There's a huge time pressure to try to get some resources, to scope out some projects, and really accelerate some applications to get those applications in the door. 30 days, 60 days, the difference between the BAA and the budget is usually at least 3 months. So that's 3 months that we would not have to help towns work on their applications and get their foot in that door before it closes. And basically, if the BAA passes, my immediate life would be getting that program up and running as quickly as humanly possible.
Sorry, okay, I think I saw the hand here next.
Marcia Carver from Bradford. So on that list where you show the towns that are qualified, it shows that Bradford has a town administrator that we don't. So how would you go about correcting that?
So that particular data element, we got that data through VLCT, and as we've looked into it, we're reconsidering the use of that data element. We're going to look at, we're looking at potentially using instead municipal budget, municipal grand list, trying to get at, okay, what's the tax base in this community? Because some towns don't have anything but residential property, so it's very difficult for them to raise municipal revenue. So I think the town administrator is either going to become less consequential, or it might be removed entirely. If it is straight incorrect, then we can have that changed if you reach out to me. But I do think we've also found situations where a town didn't have an administrator, but they had 4 economic development staff. So we're trying to improve that variable.
Okay, I'm gonna go over to this side.
Marvin Harrison, Newbury. So if your town is on that list, Are these just for ARPA funds or for, I mean, it sounded like I heard a whole lot of other grant programs here too. I mean, is it for accessing any of these grant programs or just for ARPA?
I'm going to repeat the question, but I'm going to have you clarify what the list is, okay? So the question is, if your town is on the list, does that qualify you for other grant funds, or is this for specific ARPA grant funds?
So when we created the Underserved Community Index, the first purpose of that was to help programs prioritize where appropriate and where they had the discretion to do that in statute between communities. So it was meant to be a weighting factor. You know, in a grant application, there's often a lot of factors that may go into it, and it was intended to be one. For this program, towns who score above 25% on the Underserved Community Index would be eligible for the assistance. It's general fund, the request. The types of projects are water, sewer, housing, and other, well, there's other projects that would enable economic development. And there was one other one other than water, sewer, and housing that was spacing on. I apologize, I should have it memorized by now. Broadband. Climate change mitigation, yeah. Broadband is kind of a catch-all in the other projects, but I think the main reason we didn't list broadband explicitly is because Director Hallquist is engaging with the CUDs, and there is a different allocation method and a different support system for that. So while we could pitch in, we don't feel the gap there is as large. So to fully answer your question, the technical assistance is for those types of projects. ARPA is the most pressing need, but we're not going to evaluate it and make sure that the project would be ARPA eligible before helping you. So it's a strong alignment, but it's not only for ARPA purposes.
Great, okay, over here.
Yeah, Steve Topol from Bedford. We've got a unique problem that has to do with the bridge closure to New Hampshire over the line. A number of businesses are going to be probably badly impacted because it's going to go for 18 months, the closure. Are there any agencies or any funds available to help businesses that are impacted?
Okay, so Steve from Thetford wants to know if there are any funds to support businesses that are adversely impacted as a result of the bridge closure for roughly 18 months. Michelle?
So again, Michelle Boomhauer, Agency of Transportation. Oftentimes communities are impacted when we do infrastructure upgrades, and unfortunately there's not a mechanism to assist businesses who are impacted directly. And so to the extent that any of these businesses maybe were impacted by the pandemic and could qualify for another program that we have out there, that might be the sort of thinking to take to these businesses to then connect back with the Agency of Commerce to discuss. I don't know, Joan, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, possibly. I was going to say, depending on the type of business, they may be eligible for either community recovery or the VITA forgivable loan program. But there are separate requirements for that, so I guess we should just have a separate conversation about eligibility. The other opportunity may be the Northern Border Regional Commission if the town wants to apply on behalf of the businesses. But I'd have to check on just precisely how many, and would this be a revolving loan fund? Like, there probably is flexibility. I just can't answer yes or no right now. But those are the avenues I think I would pursue. Okay.
And again, you know, Erica's also a great conduit here as well. Just, you know, Joan and Erica, we all work together very closely, so just want to make sure there were some connections there. In the back.
So I'm Mary Linehan from the Select Board in Stratford, and I'm particularly interested in the IIJA grants that are upcoming. And I know that they are going to go through grants.gov, which are federal grants. They're extremely heavy lift. I do those kind of grants for my living. And I'm wondering, will there be any resources available to help towns write the kind of grants that's going to be required in order to get those awards? We're particularly interested in aid, for example.
Okay, so just to repeat it for those watching at home, question is with the IIJA grants that are coming down the pike, Those are potentially going to be challenging because they'll be done on grants.gov, which can be a heavy lift. And will there be any resources that would be provided to help towns write those grants?
I can do that.
Okay, great.
So, yes, indeed, writing federal grants and doing benefit cost analysis is very complicated. And we even, the Agency of Transportation, often will hire consultants to help us write our grants because of that. We have been working with the Federal Highway Administration and the League of Cities and Towns and regional planning commissions to try and come up with more educational resources to help communities understand how to write those grants. To a certain degree, regional planning commissions have been able to provide some technical assistance in the past, but unless the grant has a nexus to the ARPA technical assistance that Doug mentioned, we don't have like specific people on retainer who we could direct a community to get free help at this point.
Would you be willing to share your list of who you farm out to so that we can access it as well?
It's really just who we use.
Yeah, so I know that the
Yeah.
V-Trans also uses
Yes, that's what
contractors to do this work.
Yeah.
We have a list of appropriate.
Yes. I can get that for you.
Perfect. And it seems like Commissioner Tierney has something to add.
I just wanted to add to that answer as well. That's precisely the kind of question that we need to hear today.
Yeah.
Because if you read Vermont Digger, you saw a piece today about how the folks in Calais are waiting to see who's going to run for office, because nobody is, because folks have been doing this stuff for 18 years and said, I've had it. Okay, this is a full-time job. So we're aware of that, and the more we hear that from you, the more you strengthen our case to say, hey, something is needed in that level to help. Now, for instance, in my agency, we've gotten some money from the Department of Energy to stand up a part of our energy office to help with that kind of capacity on very specific grants that don't go to transportation. But we need to be thinking that way, and that's why we're here today. So thank you for raising that. Others in the room, let us hear from you about that as well.
And I'm just going to add, could the rural capacity money be used for something like that? Since that's general fund.
It's general fund, and so the current language, if a transportation style project would be necessary for economic development, actually as I was driving from Montpelier to Vershire, I was thinking about how roads affect economic development in an area.
What do you know?
So, I think an argument could be made. I think that $3 million is a fair amount of money, but when you apply it to the statewide scale and all the towns would be trying to help, it's only going to go so far. So it's not going to solve the whole problem for IIJA. But yeah, certain towns might be able to get help with that type of grant writing.
Okay.
Maroa Benjamin from the Bradford Select Board. Just to piggyback onto that concern that we just heard about writing the grants, managing the grants at the town level is the biggest problem that we face. And trying to make sure that the grant is applied and finished up and all the paperwork and all of the documentation that goes on with it is where we really need help, and it would make our life a lot easier if there was some other streamlined process that we could use that would help that.
We feel that.
I bet you
within our own
do.
agencies. Actually, Commissioner Tierney would like to speak.
This isn't especially helpful to you, but for those of you who've been in state government, in town leadership for a while, and those of you who have only recently started doing it, and those of you who know people who are looking, you must have records of what you did during Irene, in the aftermath of Irene, to access federal assistance through FEMA and others in order to get your feedback on that. Now, I recall Irene mostly from a central Vermont perspective. Forgive me, it's not quite as clear to me what the damage was on this side of the state anymore, but there was a lot of damage throughout the state. So look back on your records of past episodes where there's been an infusion of federal funding to see how your town or your village went about accessing that funding or what went wrong for you. Because understanding that starting point in your self-governance history helps you explain to us what it is you need. And in turn, that helps us better understand and imagine where we should be looking to try to get you help.
Yeah,
I was
absolutely.
just gonna, I can only speak for state hazard mitigation, but I will say if you apply for the FEMA grants or the Flood Resilient Communities Fund, any of that funding, we really try to take on a lot of that responsibility for you. We've started, because we just realized that that's that issue, that overwhelming issue. So we try to do as much as we can hands-on with you. We also we start doing kickoff meetings. Because from the time you put in the application to if it's FEMA a year later, you don't even remember what you put in. Right. So we started having kickoff meetings where we'll sit down with you and say, okay, now we're going to talk about, and we're doing check-in meetings. We're working with our finance department, DPS Finance, to get them to start coming to some of the municipal days, to our preparedness conference. We're hoping that you're going to start seeing them more often so you can ask those grant management questions. And you're managing how many different grants, and we all have different policies and procedures. So I can speak, at least for us, contact us and say, I need help, and here's what help I need. And I would also say, you're hearing today, go to all of your partner agencies. Let them know. If they don't have a mechanism yet in place, the more they're hearing from you that this is a need, the more we can do something about it. But please ask, because like I said, we'll try to do everything we can as much as humanly possible, because most of the person calling people on FEMA grants that were supposed to close 5 years ago and saying, oh, by the way, FEMA wants to know what that one piece of paper is. So we're in it with you. Like I said, whatever we can do, we work for you. You tell us what you need from us to make your job easier.
Doug has more to add, hopefully.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. That's one reason the rural assistance program is structured to be, start with a needs assessment, then an opportunity assessment, all the way through program and project implementation and management. So the idea is for an eligible town that they would be able to, whatever phase they are in that spectrum, come in and acquire assistance. And some of them might be acquiring 3 to 4 years of assistance that we would scope out and commit to with those funds. And the other thing that if the BAA push is successful, if we get that program moving, obviously the first push will be to provide the assistance to the communities that are eligible based on whatever the criteria the legislature agrees to. But then we would also reach out to anyone who's in the 50 to 75% and reach out directly to any of those towns and start to scope out their needs as well. So just because towns aren't in the first pass of assistance, we're not going to give up on it. I think the administration feels pretty strongly that there is a need out there. We're seeing it come through in the data, in the gaps in the data, essentially. And so yes, you're absolutely right, that long-term support is a challenge.
So to that point, Peter Berger from Fairleigh, our grant list is separate from our population base. And if we're trying to do village designation or to bring in a septic system, we wouldn't meet the criteria because of the grant list. But it's separate of the population, and we're going to be serving with monies for the ARPA or the septic inside the village designation. So in other words, I don't know how to address that point of view. Say you spoke to a differentiation, and I'm asking that question. Is there a way to address that specifically by saying our population base, would have this mean income versus the whole of town? That's a difficult one.
I heard septic. I heard
village
septic.
You might be talking about some A&R specific criteria, but I can also.
You go first.
So, if you're talking about how I was referring to the construction of the index, the capacity index, we're considering adding a couple variables to it, so that right now it's 4 variables. And then we would add probably 2 or 3 more, and maybe take away the town administrator or fine tune that variable. So the value of your grand list, basically, the more property you have, the fewer points you would get on the index. So I think it's no secret, Burlington has the most property value in the state. So Burlington is the top of the spectrum, and probably Buell's Gore or something along those lines is the 1 or so. And then So so they would get 100 if they have very, very low property list, because basically it's saying you don't have a tax base to raise need on. But if you have a tax base because you've got second homes or whatever, that additional property value would lower your score, yes. If you have a small population, that is a separate variable. So they would be kind of counted against each other to get that capacity score. So I think the issue of like complex communities, like Fairleigh, like even Killington has a complex structure, Stowe even has a complex structure if you look at the different neighborhoods.
True.
So I think we're trying to balance that in the capacity side.
And that's just for access to the rural capacity money,
Yes.
right? To be clear, is your question about access to that money or access to waterways?
Well, we're doing an analysis for septic in the village, and
Okay.
so
So
the
that's
question
the-
then becomes, how do we, move forward based on the capacity and capabilities?
Right, so at Agency of Natural Resources, the team that I get to work with, we have what are called project developers who are there to answer those exact questions. Talk about what it might take to fund a project, what it might take to go through the steps of designing. It's a long road to build an in-ground big wastewater system for our community, for a village, and it's a good payoff too, because obviously there's a lot you can do. My colleague Lynette, whom I mentioned earlier, I hope you'll take a quick moment to chat with her at the end, because she can kind of give you a pathway to get started. The subsidy that's available under the bipartisan infrastructure law is a slightly different structure than the community index that Doug Farnham is talking about here. There's also, there's the community ability to pay that the state revolving loan funds and the bipartisan infrastructure law grants look at. But we're here to help demystify that, so and we're all about it.
And our funding as well for municipality to support water, wastewater, as long as it's.
I'm gonna give you the very last question. We're over time, which is fine, so I'll have you be prompt, and then some of us will stick around for maybe 10 minutes or so you could go direct people, but give you that one last option.
This is just a very quick plug for, as you're finalizing your indicator for the index, I would like to suggest that you also include a look at towns, and I'm thinking of Stratford in particular, which may seem to have a high tax base, but has absolutely no state funding towards roads and a very, very large road network that is costly. And so there's a balance of what might look like income and then the debt that we are constantly managing. So I'd just like to throw that out as a consideration.
Yeah, that's very timely, because we are considering, now we got the roads data from Agency of Transportation, and we're considering how to incorporate, the best way to incorporate that. One method of doing it would be to look at the percentage of paved versus unpaved roads in the community, or to look at the mileage they're responsible for. The problem with roads is that it's very complicated, and boiling it down to one view that can be incorporated into an index is, but I think VLCT actually also recommended the unpaved versus paved as an indicator of a town's capacity.
Thank you.
So go ahead.
Can I share? So during COVID, so only briefly, I'm from Bradford, but this announcement is not on behalf of that. And Fairleigh, Westford. During COVID, we started an Upper Valley North group that was really just to talk about things that were happening, or masks and that kind of stuff. But I've continued to use the list to share everything that these folks send me and send everyone else. So if you want to be on that Google group, you can just come and see me. It might be an extra way to channel to get information from these folks if you're not already.
And absolutely, I just want to let you all know, again, for those of us that can stick around for a few minutes after, we will. Some people might have some events that are pulling us away quickly, but whether it be through Erica or through how you received your invitation for today, you can certainly get in contact with us. We're happy to try to answer your questions or find an answer for you. But we are so grateful that you showed up today and shared whatever was on your mind. And as you walk away, and as Commissioner Tierney said, if you think of something at 2 a.m., email us or write it down and let us know the next day. But we're here for you, and we want to try to help remove the barriers and make sure you're accessing these programs and the dollars that should be coming to your communities. So, Thank you.